Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So the mission of BlackAnthropy, it was started because of my journalism, meeting so many people like you, and being limited to 800 or 1,500 words. In this life, that is not enough to tell a person's story. So I created BlackAnthropy, and the mission is to shine a black light on individuals, nonprofit organizations, and entrepreneurs who are impacting the community by providing knowledge, resources, opportunity, and inspiration. And surely you check all of those boxes. As an entrepreneur, most entrepreneurs are going to check all of those boxes, especially when you survived as an entrepreneur as long as you have. So tell us what Touch Cleveland is.
Well, Touch is basically the marketing and PR firm that really complements what you're doing. So we are a full service marketing and PR firm focused on community and business development, which means we intentionally seek organizations, nonprofits, for profits, public figures that do have impact or influence on the communities that are the ones either developing or trying to push those resources and programs to the community. And we try to make sure that other entrepreneurs and small business owners know about those opportunities, capitalize on those opportunities, and are involved.
And so, what would be so when you how do people find you? How do you find clients to work with in order to help them fulfill that mission?
Well, now that I'm coming up on year 10, I'm starting to have to explore new avenues of doing that. But I've prided myself up until this point on being someone who hasn't really had to do a lot of soliciting or advertising myself. I just network. I've really just networked and been fortunate to meet kindred spirits, who see what I do, believe in what I do, and most of my businesses come by referral. So I take every project, whether it's large or small, seriously. I try to make sure I do the best work and produce great results, and been fortunate enough to just have referrals. So I don't really have to go after too much.
Okay. And so when you get with the
Yeah.
client though, what are you doing to say so first let's do this. Talk about what is marketing, what is PR, and why should and do companies want to do marketing and public relations?
Well, so marketing, a lot of people, they do one facet of marketing and they think they're doing marketing. So they may be an expert in social media and they'll say they do marketing, or they might be great at designing flyers or promoting parties and they say they do marketing. And those are all forms of marketing, facets of marketing, but being a marketer, being a real marketing strategist means that you are able to take many different tools and tactics and align them systematically in a way that produces results reaching the client's goals. Specifically, you're able to pull out which tactics are going to be most effective for that client, typically based on research or other demographics, geographics. Marketing, takes a look at all of those things in order to really be able to form and implement an effective strategy for a client. With public relations, that's more so managing like your brand and your image in the public eye. And so companies, of course, want to do marketing because they want to get the word out about their business or their service. And then they typically want to do public relations because they then want to manage how that brand or service is viewed in the public eye.
So give me an example of like what would you do for marketing if I came and said, okay, I need marketing for my business, which is selling widgets, and then I need PR to get the word out that I'm selling these widgets. And so, what does the PR? What are you doing with me to make sure that what you do is something that I, as a client,
Yeah.
want? Because that's probably very important.
Yeah, well, the first step is always discovery, which I think some marketers, self-proclaimed marketers, are starting to do a little bit better about it. But typically, what I've seen is, some people will just jump into things like, oh, okay, you want PR, cool. I'm gonna get you this press release. I'm gonna get you this website. But for us at Touch, it's always started with discovery. So it's like, who are you trying to be? What do
Right.
you want to look like? Let's make sure we really uncover that. Do you have the means to even keep up with that persona? Because
Right.
some people, they go about branding themselves in a way that they cannot keep up with authentically. And that's never a good look, right? That's going to end up being pretty bad for you if you can't keep up with that image. So first we're looking at, what do you actually want to achieve? What can you reasonably achieve and keep up with? And then we work backwards as far as figuring out how we should go about that. So it's very contingent upon each person's goals, and I don't recommend every PR tactic or every marketing tactic for each person.
And it's about budget too.
Oh,
What can a person
absolutely,
afford to do? And
absolutely.
so, do you always do?
And some clients are not ready for PR. They're just not, because you have to have someone who is ready to be in front of the camera and talk. So there has been times that I've represented clients, for them on camera, so I'd be the one to speak to the media, but that's not really sustainable, right? Because then you're always trying to have a consultant in place to be able to speak for you, to me. So you want to have you got to be comfortable with public speaking. If you
Right.
want to go down that PR road,
Right.
you have to be comfortable with the public speaking. You have to be at least somewhat knowledgeable about how to speak in sound bites and how to be able to get your point across and articulate that quickly. Again, you have to be able to keep up with that image, whatever that persona is that you're building, and it be consistent for customers. So typically, depending on budget, PR is not even something I recommend for entrepreneurs or small businesses in the early stages, because it can be costly and you can't control the media. That's the thing. That's what I'm always warning small businesses when they're like, okay, can we get media out here? And it's like, no offense, but nobody knows who you are.
Okay.
And,
Yes. Yes.
and,
Yes.
if some politician says something silly on the news in the morning, your story might get bumped for something else
Hmm.
that they deem more important. And unfortunately, I don't care if you are Olivia Pope. You cannot always control what happens in the outside world and what stories might get bumped if it's not significant enough. So I typically, when I'm working with a client, I'm transparent with them to say, like, it's not enough for you to just be throwing a party and the proceeds are going to whatever. That's great. It sounds newsworthy, but we got to take it
Yep.
up a notch,
Yep.
So can we get maybe the kids to come out to this and, do something or speak on behalf? Is there any other type of tribute maybe we can add to the event that makes this actually noteworthy enough for the news to come out? So I do help them at least try to think about how to take that to the next level, but it's not something I recommend if they're not
So
there.
then, talk about like what history a company needs, because to your point, you you're starting out, or whether you've been in business X amount of time, if they have not done these things, and if they think marketing and PR is something they want to do to grow their business, to try to take it to the next level, to try to reach people, again, when you come to a person like
Mhm.
you should have a history that allows you to look at this data, like you say, the discovery,
Yeah.
see what type of events you have, and you
Mhm.
are better able to recommend stuff, because it doesn't really
Yeah.
work just do an ad,
Yeah.
just do a
Not at
press
all.
release, or,
Mhm.
you know, so talk about how important it is for your company to have like a company, a nonprofit, whomever you're working with, a client, to have a history
Yeah.
that then you can say, okay, give them better guidance or instruction. Okay, I think you should do this in this market and this one and this one,
Mhm.
because the marketing and the PR isn't the same
Nope.
where you go, where different areas you may try to target.
It's extremely important, and all I will say is, if you want to save yourself from getting got, and by getting got I mean like someone getting in your pockets and having you
Yep. Yep.
waste major dollars on, any services,
Yes.
your best bet is to do some research yourself and to at least test the waters. And so even when working with small businesses, the reason why Touch shifted from servicing only small businesses to servicing more, higher end clients in the nonprofit and for-profit space is because we found ourselves doing more educating for the
Yeah.
small businesses than
Yep.
actually servicing them. And I don't typically service small businesses that have not been in business at least a year. If you
At
haven't
least a year.
sold to someone, at least one person, it's not going to be a good fit. And I've had businesses that have come and they want a website or they want someone to manage their social, and they have not even sold one product. And it's like, you don't even know who you are yet. You don't know who you are as a company. You don't know who you are as a business. Your brand literally is like an infant that just came out the womb that has no personality whatsoever. And then you're expecting someone to turn it into something. It's possible, but it might not look like what you want it to look like. And so typically I'm telling small businesses, test it out a little bit, get a feel for what you think you might want to do, play around with some social media, see if that even works, see if it's even something you're comfortable with doing, because that's going to allow you to, one, know, okay, here are the things I'm naturally good at when it comes to promoting my business. Here are the things I suck at that, like, I absolutely need some help with. Here are some roadblocks I've come to play with that, like, I actually have these questions. And the more that you're able to articulate that
Yes.
to whoever
Yes.
the person is servicing you, the better they can actually reach your needs, and the less money you'll spend now, because now you're not just taking someone's word for what they can produce. And I think that people think marketers just have magic, like we can just wave a magic wand and things happen, and it doesn't happen like that. And I see a lot of businesses, they just dive right into it with, again, wanting to do a press release or an ad, and there's people out here who will service them that, charge them thousands of dollars. They don't get a return on their investment. Then now they're disgruntled, and thinking that, oh, marketers is just, we've some of them have we're starting to get a bad reputation, like attorneys used to, right? I think it's better for the attorneys now, but at one point it was like, oh, that's a lie, that's a lying lawyer, right? Yeah. So I feel like marketers is the profession now that's getting that slack. But you can avoid all of that if you just do a little assessing first.
Yeah. I wanted to, that's why I'm glad you came on the show to talk about this, because we're definitely in this entrepreneurial spirit and age. And you wrote an article about, and we'll talk about this a little later on real estate. You wrote an article about this. And I think that it is so important for people to understand something very important you said, because I've experienced this trying to do different things throughout my lifetime, is you've got to be able to get your business started to see what works.
Yep.
And then not only that, to understand what you're good at, what you don't want to do. And you should not just think that I can just go to touch and they're going to fix, my business, make it,
I
visible,
cannot.
make it visible to everybody, make everybody want
Yeah.
it. You have to have a good product, and you have to have a good message for it, and the best person is you to be able to tell that message. You all are behind the scenes telling the person, advising them on how to get that message out, which I think is very important. So again, that's why I'm glad you came on, because I know that there's a difference between marketing and then the PR and then the advertising. And people think, that just doing again ad, and everybody will see it and they be like, oh yeah, that is a great idea. Oh yeah, I'm going to that event. Oh yeah, I'm buying. And it's like, no, it doesn't even work,
doesn't
like,
work like
that.
that.
Especially in this environment where there's so many options for products and services, people aren't really going to go and do research to find out who are you and are you good and all of this. Like you said, that's how your business got started. And we'll talk about what made you start your own business too. We'll get into that. But so as a marketing and public relations firm, let's go through some examples of some of the work that you've done to give an idea on what marketing may look like and how it differs for different companies, right?
Yeah.
So talk about marketing, being a marketing consultant, managing marketing and business development.
Ooh, so it looks very different. So again, some people, when they think of marketing, they're really just thinking like, oh, this person is promoting, it's just social media promotion, or it's just, creating hype around a brand and all of that. And it's like, yes, marketing deals a lot with aesthetics, but it also deals a lot with politics and economics and even technology. And so when you're marketing for business development, you're literally taking a look at all of those things. I mean, every single facet of it. And so, for example, if I'm working with a nonprofit that is, looking to implement some program in the community, well, obviously, like if that program is supposed to serve under resourced individuals, they may have the right community, but then we're taking a look at, is it on the bus line?
Right.
What else is around it? How far is it out of proximity from where most of these people work? Are we providing childcare? Are we feeding people? And believe it or not, like there's some nonprofits who sometimes they want to do like the focus groups and again these community meetings, which is great initiatives,
Yes.
right? But then they don't always necessarily take a look at the other aspects that are hindrances or barriers, the everyday life needs
Right.
that sometimes prevent people from wanting to be,
Yes.
or from getting involved with these things, even though they want to be. So when we're doing marketing and business development mixed together, it's incorporating a lot of that. Again, if we're talking about opening up a whole new center somewhere, we're making sure that it's actually in a good proximity to the place that it's going to serve the people who need it the most.
Okay. You also did created membership benefit and guideline handbook for a company. Talk
Wait,
about
which one was
that
that?
was North New York Life Insurance.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So talk about doing work like that again. How do you know what to put in the handbook?
Yeah.
Again, this company's been around how many decades? So they have the information there
Yeah.
to be able for you to draw off of.
Yeah, so that's a big part that a lot of people miss when it comes to marketing. And so with the handbook, the part that that's getting at is more so like around the customer service. And I don't even always like to use the word customer service. I prefer the word experience. But the experience that a person has with your place or your business can make or break everything. You can do all the best marketing and PR in the world, but I often explain to clients it's like leading a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Even if I'm successful at getting the people to you, it's in your hands once they walk through your door. It's in your hands at that point. So if you have a restaurant or a boutique or something like that, we might get the people there, but whether or not they actually buy a dress or they enjoy their meal and they come back with friends again, that is totally up to you. So when it comes down to like the handbooks and things like that, what we've done for clients in that sense is we're taking a look at their customer service process. When you interact with the client, how do you make them feel? How do you thank them for their service? How do you encourage them to come back? What type of incentives do you encourage? Was the service fast? Did it meet their expectations? Because all of these things determine whether or not they return. And the saying goes, it costs twice as much to get a new client as it does to keep one. So a lot of people, they're focused on numbers and just, serving so many people, but you never stop to think to retain them.
Yes.
So when we developed that handbook for New York Life, that was running their agency resource center. And prior to coming in, the agents kind of just did what they wanted to do, and of course they loved not having the structure, but the center was not profitable because of that, and it also made things complicated to get done because everybody was just expecting to be able to come in and get what they wanted right there. So there was no order, there was no structure, and the center, because of that, was just bleeding money. So when I came in, it was like, okay, well, we have to do something about this because for the new agents coming in, they have to have clear expectations so that, this center can run well. And if the center is not profitable, everybody loses the benefit, everybody. So something like that, although it's not your typical marketing, it was a necessary step in the marketing in order to get the center back profitable.
Now, to me, underneath what you're saying is, in order to know that that center was not profitable, the company had to have some underlying data
Yep.
to let them know. And again, this goes back to what's your history, what's your track
Yep.
record for doing this. And so you may not want to do it, people may not want to do it, but this is why it's important for the business owner, the people operating the business to solicit that feedback from their clients so that the clients or the customers tell them what they like,
Mhm.
what they didn't like, and then for you also to make sure you have sound bookkeeping
Yep.
to know that I need to change something because I'm not
Yeah.
making money here.
Yeah, and I mean that part goes into the finances, which I'll admit, like even as an entrepreneur, I can't say that that's always been the most fun part for me. But I have always managed my books and my taxes myself. I did use an accountant last year, and I do think it's important to at least work with an accountant as a consultant at the very least. But I like to manage my own money and see where it's going. But it's important that you know that you have to know how much you're spending on certain things and if and when those prices are going up. And even, from a marketing standpoint around with that, I recently taught a class on understanding your industry, and it talked about
Right.
all those things of like, if you don't know how the economy is ebbing and flowing and how it might be affecting the resources that you use to manage or run your business, then you are literally like operating in the dark. You may as well just put a blindfold on, and that's how you're going about running your business. So like for example, bakers, I felt really bad for the bakers a few months ago when eggs were was like $4.
And almost a
$4
few
a
whole
dozen,
years.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like how much can you realistically charge for a brownie or for a cookie, in order to be able to make up for the fact that these eggs are now $4. But if you are aware again of how those things are being affected, then you can at least start to throw in other things, to offset that. So for example, maybe a baker has never done events in their life, but when eggs was $4 and their profit margins were smaller, maybe they decided to open up their center to do more events, or to allow someone else to rent the space, for a baby shower or
Okay. Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that. But you have to be aware of those things so that you can also know, like, what am I comfortable with kind of throwing in the mix if I do find myself at odds when the economy is ebbing and flowing like
Okay.
that.
And so now let's talk about something that again shows the diversity of what you do as a marketing strategist. You assisted with the implementation of SAP for over 450
Oh, yeah.
Applebee's restaurants. And again,
Whew.
now you're talking about IT. So you're talking about
Yeah.
going from insurance company and assistant insurance agents in a center for
Yeah.
with being profitable to now operations, actual
Yeah.
operations, and talk about what that process was like first
Yeah.
for you to say what is SAP and how does it work? Because
Yeah.
I would imagine that's something you had to look into for yourself.
That's so interesting. Yes, like in the early stages of my career, before I was in, a lot of the community business development spaces, my marketing expertise was very versatile. I started out at an electrochemical company, and then yes, at that Apple American Group Place doing the SAP, and then New York Live. And so with that, it was like, yeah, it was kind of a IT. Like we were supposed to just be the help desk. Like we were only supposed to come in for about a month, and then it turned into like a 3-4 month project. No, I think longer than that. I think I ended up being there almost a year. But it ended up being a communications aspect more so, and that's what we found there because it wasn't just the IT that it was the problem. It was walking people through the steps, and they had nothing. So what we ended up doing was actually creating like the step-by-step instructions
Right,
as
right.
well
Which
as
is
like the communication plan as far as, okay, if a person has this issue, they're going to this department. If they have this issue, they're going to that department. And that just leads me to, the importance of processes in general, which still goes all back into the experience and
yes,
all of that.
yes.
Like even within your own company, within your own team, when you're trying to market something to your employees, you got to make it easy for them. You have to be able
Yes,
to roll it
yes.
out in stages, in digestible steps so that everybody can get comfortable and familiar with it as quickly as possible. And at least in that case, it was a nightmare at first until we put this communications plan in place.
Okay, okay. Talk about when your work as a marketing and sales assistant.
Which one was that?
And so you did professional. You help preserve, organize, and communication between clients, research and
Oh, okay.
development.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that was at the electrochemical company. That was, oh gosh, that was a long time ago. I can't even remember. Man, I don't even
You
know.
maintain a request for the quotes and the purchases in your
Yeah,
database.
yeah. So I think what I will share about that job, being a marketing and sales assistant there, is that was an electrochemical company. So it surrounded basically they painted metals or they painted equipment with precious metals.
Mm-hmm.
So these were some actual chemists that were in the back cooking up iridium and
Mm-hmm.
ruthenium, and they made like a coating out of it that they would put over metals. Something I never even knew was
Yes.
going on,
Yes.
right? And so, literally, when you go in the grocery store and they have those rods that kind of spray the water onto vegetables and stuff, those
Mm-hmm.
rods on the inside have to be coated because, of course, if you're just running water through a regular rod, it will rust.
Mm-hmm.
So they were actually the chemists that created these precious metals for the whatever to be coated because it was different things, and people would be using these in these machines that were often like in solutions, but they needed to keep them from rusting or doing whatever, or electricity needed to be able to pass through it in some type of way. And so one of the things I had to do was like check the, I forget what it's even called, it's so long ago, but I had to check the price of those precious metals every single
Yeah. Yeah.
day,
Yeah. Yeah.
every
Yeah. Yeah.
single day. Now, really, if people were managing like their restaurants and things like that, to that level, they should be checking the price
Yes.
of
Yes.
eggs,
Yeah. Yeah.
bread, flour,
Yeah.
everything every day,
The futures
just like
market.
it. Yeah. And so it's actually the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, I think it is, that you can go on and get a consumer report almost like, I think they update it at least twice a month, and it lets you know like what the price of uh, certain food goods and services are, and it also lets you know whether or not it's increasing or
Mm-hmm.
set to
Mm-hmm.
decrease.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if you're like really managing your
Right.
restaurant, from that perspective, you should be checking on those things. But that was what made that job the most interesting. So I had to check those prices every single day because every quote was
Yeah.
based off of
Yeah.
what those metals were every
Yeah.
single day.
Yeah.
So one thing I can say also with that job is they weren't used to having someone kind of do customer service in that space.
Mm-hmm.
It was usually just like, here's your quote, okay, bye, go. But by having me in that space and being someone to really be able to talk to the customers, find out what was going on, if they had any grievances, we retained, I think, about 98% of our clients
Yeah.
throughout
Okay.
that time that I
Yeah.
was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, you listen to the BlackAnthropy radio show produced here in Cleveland, Ohio, and my guest today is owner and creative director of Touch Cleveland, a marketing and PR firm, um, Miss Chardonnay Graham. So let's do this. Let's talk about how you got started with marketing and public relations, right? You started
Yeah.
out as a writer.
Yeah.
And so, talk about, you know, growing up in East Cleveland and how you were always a writer.
Yeah, I don't know what got me into it, but I literally can remember like writing as early as 5. I can remember being kind of called out or pulled out because of a poem that I wrote in had to be first grade, and at that particular time, like no one had taught me what a haiku was or what I forget all of the other, yeah, different names of poems, but no one had taught me anything like that yet. Yet I wrote this poem, and I guess the way it was structured, it would just wowed everybody. Like, how was she able to write something like that? She's 6. And from there, it was like I just started writing. So short stories, poems became my thing. I was always a pretty bubbly little girl as far as like running my mouth talking. So by the time I got to high school and, probably even 10th grade, there was no mystery that like, okay, I'm going into journalism. Like that was what I wanted to do. Even in high school, I was pulled to do the morning news or the morning announcements, so I had that as a responsibility very early on. So by the time I got to college, it was just a for sure bet that I was going to do journalism. But um, it was actually a professor that kind of ruined my love for it because he would just red ink the mess out of everything that I wrote. so much to the point that it didn't sound like me
Yep,
anymore.
yep,
And
yep,
I was
yep.
just like, okay, well, if this is journalism, I don't know,
Right,
because
right.
I still wanted to sound like me. I was used to writing these creative stories, and then now forced to kind of write under this structure. And so that experience was actually just at Lakeland Community College during a semester. But then when I went to Notre Dame, they didn't have a journalism program. So that was the sacrifice I ended up making for a full scholarship. But because of that is where I decided to do a dual and did communications and PR. And that was then what exposed me to, like, okay, I can still get my journalism in here, but I can still keep my creative flair, and kind of write how I want to write, and bring stories to life, and really just focus on the storytelling instead of this journalistic format of
Yeah, yeah,
trying to
yeah, 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 yeah.
get to the facts,
Yeah.
So I like the sensational storytelling a little bit more.
And so you're justified in, being put off with the red inking because at what? You delivered the graduation speech for your elementary school,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it's different if you just, feel like I'm a writer and who are you to, change my words, right? Because as writers, one of the first things you learn is all writing is rewriting, right?
Yeah.
But, this is something different, right? And then not only that, you did the original poem,
Mhm.
right, as the valedictorian
Mhm.
for your
Yeah.
school, right?
Yeah.
And then when your school, you all had a newsletter,
Yep.
right? And you were writing for that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, and these were probably a little different times where, people probably, okay, yeah, we just let stuff slide.
Mhm.
When you're doing something like this on a consistent basis, it's no just letting it slide. This
Yeah.
is the only person we got doing this. So so you go to Notre Dame, and then and you realize you still are taking as many journalism classes as you can.
Mhm.
And then how did you realize? So you did the marketing and communications dual degree. How did you realize that writing for marketing allowed you to continue to exercise your writing muscles?
Hmm. I think it was probably more of the PR side that did that for me,
Okay.
because I definitely still did write for the paper in college. So I still got my journalism on in there, but I knew that it wasn't necessarily something I wanted to go into as a profession anymore. Um, but what the marketing allowed me to do, though, is again to just like be more in control of that full picture, the full picture of creating this whole story in everything, not just in the writing, but in how we present the company, how we brand the
Okay. Yep.
company,
Yep. Yep.
and so understanding that everything is communicating
Yes. Yes.
and putting that all together as and making it cohesive at that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
not this is your service, the way you present yourself, and what we're telling the public is all consistent. Because you can make a good
Yep.
story and
Yep.
tell them whatever you want to,
Yep.
but like I said, if they come in and they experience something different, then I don't know, you shooting yourself in the foot. But yeah, I think being able to see that I wasn't just throwing out a story to fill in 15 seconds on the news,
Mm-hmm.
versus this
Right.
was an opportunity to really, go in
Right.
depth, kind of like you said. It's just not enough time sometimes in an
Right.
article in 800, 1,500 words to get someone's story. Knowing that I could do that across multiple platforms and in
Mm-hmm.
different ways, that was what really sold me. I was like, okay, yeah, this is my lane.
Again, I mean, that's why I created, BlackAnthropy, because if I were to do an article in whatever publication on you, a
Mhm.
lot of this would just be so stripped out and it would be
Mhm.
so watered down. And,
Yeah.
it's almost like either I got to focus on touch or I got to focus on you, growing up in journalism,
Mhm.
because then I got to, incorporate what other people experience with you were like. And so let those words go very fast.
Yeah.
And you just don't get to do that. And, when you're writing articles per se, I guess you could write a book or something else, but I just don't think that. I think people's story is so much bigger. They have so much
Mhm.
value to add. All of the details that you talked about with, marketing, public relations, why do it, why not do it, that doesn't go in an article.
Yeah.
I mean, and when do people hear and learn that?
Mhm.
About
Mhm.
how you've adopted, you know, you're always on a learning trajectory yourself. You get these new clients, you got to figure out and learn what their business is and
Yep.
all this other stuff. So let's talk about again as a visionary, you writing articles. So you started in 2022 writing for Cleveland.com.
Yeah.
And I love that introductory article that you did. And right, my promise to speak truth and shed light as one of Cleveland.com new columnists. Talk about writing that article, being so transparent and open about, you graduating with this communications, degree, and then it's like you're looking for a job and can't find one. Talk about, being able to just again cohesively write
Yeah.
that story. It just flows so well reading it, and that's a sign of a very good writer and visionary when a person doesn't want to hop around what you wrote and
Yeah.
read from beginning to end.
Yeah. That article was interesting because it's like I don't think I knew what I got myself into until after it was released. And then there were people writing me from Youngstown and Medina, and I was like, "Oh, this is real." um, but yeah, it was like, I've been a little dormant with my writing lately with Cleveland.com, and it's been a challenge because it's one of those things where you do have to be very, very delicate about what you're putting out there and how you're saying it and making sure that you're well informed
Yes,
on both
yes,
sides.
yes.
And what most people don't realize about journalism or about writing in general is if, and granted, for Cleveland.com, it is an opinion
Yes.
piece. As a columnist, it is all technically just an opinionated article. But I try not to write like that. I
Yes.
still try to take a neutral, non-biased
yes.
approach. And people don't realize, like, if you can't present two sides of the story
Yes.
and still draw an effective conclusion, and personally, to me, it's like you're not doing journalism.
Yes.
You're just ranting,
Yes, yes.
which is okay. You know what I mean? But I feel like the beauty in writing, especially from a journalistic perspective, is when you can present two sides fairly and draw, conclusion. So with that article, at least for me in writing it, it was just like, okay, Char, let's be careful. We don't want to come out too aggressive. We don't want to be the angry black woman, but we also very much want to represent that, like, hey, yes, I'm from East Cleveland. I am young. There is some things I don't understand yet, but there's also a lot of things that I see that I just don't like, that I'm
Yes,
not sure
yes.
of. And hey, I welcome the feedback. I welcome the pushback. I welcome, questions, or if anybody wants to challenge anything, teach me. I'll, I'll retract the statement if necessary, or go in more in depth if necessary if I need to. But yeah, I meant every word of that article, and now sometimes one of my articles did get me in trouble when I spoke about the county election. That one got me into trouble, and after that, I was just like, do I really want to do this?
I didn't bring that one up. I got a couple
Yeah,
more that we're going to talk
yeah,
about, but
yeah.
I didn't want to bring that up because I knew you were going to do an excellent job of talking about Touch Cleveland, your professional experience, and what you do. And I mean, we're just in this, very decisive, hyperbolic, decisive. It doesn't take much to get people,
Yeah.
put off with you anymore. So
Yeah.
I
Well,
wasn't going to bring that up, but
it's okay
'cause I
though.
can,
But what's interesting about that though is, well, so for one, I don't choose the headlines. So that's one thing about writing as the columnist. Like, Cleveland.com chooses the headlines, and of course they choose the headlines based on what's clickbait. So the headline for that particular article was definitely on purpose, as far as them trying to ruffle some feathers. But what I found most interesting was the professionals that did react to it that I could tell had not read the whole thing. And to me, you have to be pretty bold to speak out on something when you have not done your due diligence.
Right.
So that's really all I have to say about that one.
But I mean, that's the environment we live in.
Yeah.
I watch some stuff. Different journalists have their own YouTube channels, and I watch some of it is about some of them do critiquing of what other people have said, and then of course, people critique what they say, and it's like that's just the environment that
Yeah.
we're in. Is this, Charles Barkley? He said something a few years ago. That I really that really has resonated and stuck with me for years. He says it's easy to be a critic,
Yep.
and so that's how a lot of things are. I think now is you say something and it's whatever has made it, people take the posture that they can just lash out, and they're just going to lash out and say what they think or feel, and perhaps a week, a month, a year later, you think differently.
Hmm.
Did you really have to react, and did you understand the context? I think a lot of that is so missing.
Yeah.
That's why I love talking to people who are writers, because it is a thoughtful exercise
Hmm.
for many. It
Yeah.
is not something that, like you say, and especially after you put out one article, you realize, oh, this is real,
Hmm.
and so I like the way the article that you did on the neighborhood revitalization cannot come at the cost of those who have called it home for generations. And
Yeah.
again, I love that article because again, it shows the thought that went into that, the structure that went into that, the knowledge that you have to have that goes into that, and that's. I just did an article for our school newspaper on the exercise of writing, and and that's what this article reminded me of, how you really went through that and talked about you know what the issue is. There's this push for people to become entrepreneurs, specifically in the real estate space, and people don't understand
No.
what they're getting into. Talk about
No.
doing that article, because that seems like you have to have so much knowledge
Yeah.
to have be able to have done that article.
Yeah, and that's one of those that I was a little apprehensive about putting out because I kept asking myself, like, have I done enough research on this myself,
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, although I am a person that knows how to do my research thoroughly, sometimes I feel like I got to
Yes.
have experience and everything to write
Yes.
about it, and I'm trying to get myself out of that. Um, but yeah, it was one of those things that for me, I'm like, well, I've definitely been observing what's been going on for the
Yes.
last five
Yes.
years as far as the gentrification that's happening. I can recall, really 10 years now, I can recall when downtown was the ghetto and
Mm-hmm.
nobody went downtown, and downtown was completely unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
And now, the more affluent is being
Yep.
pushed downtown and the poorer people being pushed out. And so, really, just from observing things is how I saw it. Not to mention also paying attention to what's going on in other cities. And again, I understand that, like, if, you know, entrepreneurship in real estate is the new way. Oh, buy a couple houses, rent it out, all this is that. But it still goes back to everything that we were just talking about with the marketing. It's like so many people are taking that
Thank you.
avenue, not realizing that this is a business essentially. You are now a landlord. You have legal and social
Yes.
responsibility to the people that are living in your
Whether they're
spaces.
not living in there, you
Whether,
are
yeah,
liable if it catches fire.
yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Like you have major responsibilities as a landlord moving into those spaces. And I don't think that people are
Yes.
always taking that
Yes.
into consideration. I think my worst fear and what made me write that article as well is that I'm like, okay, we got people coming from all over the country that are trying to
Yes.
gobble up real
Yep.
estate,
Yep.
and then what happens
Yep.
if things don't quite turn out the way they want to, and then everybody pulls out at the same
Yep.
time.
Yep.
Now,
And their
I
difference
mean,
is
just
and they're
imagine,
corporations,
yeah, their
and so
LLC
they're
hiding,
gonna
yeah,
shut it down, move on. Whereas, and then that's not the only business those individuals are engaged in.
mhm,
And
mhm,
again, so that's why that article really resonated with me, because it's like you're saying, people don't really understand what they're getting themselves
yeah,
into and what that legal responsibility and potential liability can actually be.
yeah,
And it goes to again what you talked about earlier with the marketing and PR. It is about understanding the legalities of things, finance, economics, and what's going on
yep,
in the environment and the the industry that you're trying to get into.
mhm,
That stuff to me is so old.
yeah,
With the and really it comes from Wall Street every 5 to 10 years, dumping all of its, you know, people who don't make it for whatever
Mhm.
reason, and
Mhm.
but they've been trained to target fees in every corner of the this capitalistic
Mm.
structure, and so. I mean, I remember years ago when I first got my first apartment, my gas bill, water bill, light bill, water, whatever, they were $13.
Yeah.
Now, at a minimum, you pay $25
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
for a service. And that's what
Mhm.
Wall Street has gotten us is there's a fee for everything from
Everything.
go.
Yeah.
And so like you so I mean that article was just
Yeah.
I really love that article.
Thank you. Yeah, and you know the other thing about like the real estate, and I swear sometimes I'm like, I would be so wealthy if I could just scam like some
Yeah,
people, you
yeah.
know? I hate to say it
That's
like
what
that,
they
but it's
are.
like seriously though, like I mean, even just the people who do come in and fix up a house, and then like even in East Cleveland right now, you have people who have come in did the absolute bare
Yep,
minimum, like
yep.
no real renovation, like might have
Make it
made the
look pretty.
floors look better, might have put some paint, but then the outside of the house still looks horrible. The land around the house still looks horrible. All type of things that you'd likely get a city violation for in the first place. And then they're trying to sell those houses now for $100,000. Like when, of course, you can see on Zillow, like you just purchased the house 2 years ago for 5,000. Doesn't even look like you maybe put 10 in it, and now you're trying to sell it for 100 in East Cleveland. And again, people just don't take in any consideration as to how that is displacing other people in the community. And
Yes,
granted, I
yes.
understand ignorance is bliss, right? Like I can't say I was knowledgeable about
You're
those
right,
things
right,
once
right.
upon a time either, you know. And so I can imagine had I just had money to go buy a house, maybe I would have done it blindly too. But I also at the same time feel like, especially since the pandemic and George Floyd's situation, like there is an influx of information out
Yes,
here,
yes,
especially of
yes,
how things
yes.
affect the black community. So it's like, are you really that ignorant, or are you just choosing to be ignorant to line your own pockets? And it's like, I guess that's okay for some people. Some people are okay with living like that and being able to sleep at night. But for me personally, it's just like I, I, I could never be a part of the dismantling of a community like that.
Yep,
Now, don't
yep.
get me wrong, I want to get my hands on some real estate too. But I wouldn't feel the need to double the price in that area.
Oh
You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like, be smart. If it's going to cost you that much to even invest in it, then maybe that's not the proper investment for you. If,
Yeah,
you
you
know, if that's,
definitely couldn't go on CNBC, right? Yeah, you just not a capitalist, right? You just don't get it. It's their fault. It's their problem, right?
yeah.
As we wrap up, I got two last questions, and they're going
Okay.
to piggyback off of each other. And this last one is it starts with your article in December. Now, what was it? What time was it last year? I was listening to you on, driving, doing my regular, listen to NPR, Cleveland Public Radio here in CPN here in Cleveland. And Chardonnay is on. I'm like, oh my goodness. And so, I get where I'm going and I sit in the parking lot for an extra 25 minutes and listen, to the conversation. And so what came out of that is someone asked the question, well, she doesn't even live here anymore, something like that. And so
Oh, yeah.
talk about, I love your article where in December last year, you moved, from that basically, I'm saying that you had moved out of Cleveland. And
Mhm.
so, but in December last year, for Cleveland.com, you wrote an article on nothing reinforced my love for Cleveland quite like taking a break from it.
Yeah.
And so I like that
Yeah.
article too because as an entrepreneur, again, going back to marketing and PR,
Mhm.
growing and understanding your business and understanding these different things, you moved out of Cleveland. And so talk
Yeah.
about that article.
You know, I mean, I meant every word of it. Like, you know, I really meant every word of that article. I mean, of course, I mean, I was born and raised here, you know, so lived my first 33 years in Cleveland. And I'll admit, I've always wanted to leave. I had been wanting to leave since high school, but I didn't get a chance to leave for college, and then didn't get a chance to like leave early in my career. And so because I felt like stuck here, it was like, all right, you know, we ain't finding an opportunity out of Cleveland. Let's just do our best to fall in love with Cleveland and see what happens. And that was what I focused on. And that was how I ended up building my business and everything. But I still always felt like there's more to this world. There's more that I want to see. I want to expand my experiences and my network. So when I got the Tulsa opportunity, it was a win-win. There was just no way I could take it. And it's like it's home of Black Wall Street.
Yeah,
We had covered Black Wall Street in one of our former Impact series and everything. So it was very serendipitous to me that I had been obsessed with Black Wall Street
yeah.
for over a decade and then get the opportunity to come to Tulsa. But of course, I went through a lot of homesickness. I missed corned beef sandwiches and Mr. Heroes. And I had no idea I even liked Mr. Heroes this much. But one day I'm in Tulsa and I was like, I want a burger. But I had a particular taste for a burger. And I'm like, what am I craving? Like, I couldn't even put my finger on it. And then I realized it was a ramen burger. And then Mr. Hero's whole slogan got to play in my head. It's the taste you crave. And I was like, I got to call them now because y'all whole marketing campaign just got stuck in my head because I wanted this ramen burger. But yeah, so that article really just came out of love from missing home because I'm just like, yeah, I really do love my city. We got so many things here that is taken for granted, and I mean, because I was already doing a lot of traveling before I moved to Tulsa, I had definitely already like known that, Cleveland has a lot to offer that we sleep on. For one, there's not too many cities, let alone states, that have three sports teams. Actually, four. We got four professional teams. We got Munsters, Guardians. Like, people don't realize that. Now, in Tulsa, it was like we don't really have any. We got the kind of semi-pro, college football. I need the Sooners, okay? I'm sorry, Sooners. I'm sorry. Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, and they go hard down there.
What do you need anything else for when you get
Well,
warm
the Thunder is in OKC. They play in Tulsa sometimes though, like so we get a game or two, but yeah, it's not a lot going on in that sense.
You got the Oracle of Omaha. Oh, he's in Nebraska.
Yeah.
So kind of bringing it full circle. You've left. You've been in business. You've been an entrepreneur for at least 10 years. Talk about the challenges, the ups and downs, and the things you like,
Whew.
the things you discovered about yourself, and
But being in Tulsa or being an entrepreneur?
being an entrepreneur. Because that's part of it.
Okay,
Moving to Tulsa,
yeah.
starting in Cleveland, not getting opportunities like you said, and you said, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm applying for all these jobs. I'm not getting any callbacks, let
Yeah.
alone interviews. Start my own business it is.
Yeah.
And so talk about that journey of being an entrepreneur, sticking with it. And again, I love to invite people on the show who have a passion for something because that's something that I really would like for people to resonate with people of all ages is trust your passion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've done that.
Yeah.
And so I think whether you work a job, you're going to have ups and downs if you're an employee or if you're an entrepreneur. So talk about your journey.
Man, all I will say is it's definitely been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life because, again, I share all the time that, like, it wasn't in the plan because most people just think, you just wake up one day and decide you want to be an entrepreneur. I think that that's the worst advice anybody has ever been given. You definitely have to have a why. And so many people get into entrepreneurship with this expectation that, oh, it's going to give them this freedom, that, oh, they're going to be able to make this much money, that it's just the keys to all things. And it's not. You end up working 24/7 instead of, this 8 hours a day, 9 to 5, trying to do your own thing. You going to cry a lot. You're going to be upset a lot. Like, there's a lot of things that, you go through. There's a lot of doubt. There's days that you don't know when your next check is about to come. And it's like, if you can't still move through those moments, you're not going to make it. And I see, if anything, some people who are called serial entrepreneurs, where it's like every time you turn around, they on to something next. Some people might be okay with that, but like, to me, if I see you doing that, you're not someone I'm gonna want to work with because to me, you don't have longevity. To me, you don't know how to stick. I can't trust your level of commitment. If 1 minute you was selling soap, now you doing hair, I don't even know. But it's just, and don't get me wrong, I understand some people got to find what what they are best at. But to me, that's somebody who has not identified their passion, what you're talking about. For me, I've always ran my mouth. I always knew I was good at writing. I always, like, those were
Yeah,
things that
yeah, yeah,
came
yeah,
natural
yeah.
for me. And then it was just about finding out, well, what am I passionate about? What would I be willing to speak out about or do, whether I was getting paid for it or not? Like, what do
Yes,
I feel
yes.
strongly about? Nobody has to make me get up and do it. And when it came to the community, element, and seeing things just progress or push forward, seeing resources come into the places that don't have them, those were the things that got me fired up. And so it's like I could have done marketing and PR for anything. I could be out here trying to, promote these athletes or entertainers or
Yeah.
something. But it was like that doesn't move me,
Or Bitcoin.
Yeah, like none of that
Cryptocurrency.
moves me. Now if one of them players want to do a community event, I'm your girl.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
other
yeah.
than that, it was like it was important for me to make sure that what I was doing actually made an impact. And that's what you have to decide too. Like, are you just in it to make money, or do you actually want to make a difference? I'd like to do both.
Okay. And so, what will Chardonnay be writing about, and what will Touch Cleveland be doing in the next 10 years?
Oh
After
man,
10 years.
Whew, I don't know if we're gonna be around for another 10 years. It's gonna depend on how this next year go. Because I've went through a lot of struggles. My biggest challenge right now has been staffing. Has been just like really finding my tribe, that tribe that's
We
gonna
talked
stick.
about that
Yeah,
earlier this
yeah.
summer.
That's ironically, I would have never ever thought that this would like I haven't had an issue with getting clients, but keeping a solid team has honestly
Yes.
been one of my biggest challenges, and that's hard. That's hard on your ego when you feel like you're failing as a leader. And I honestly don't know the recipe for that. The only thing that does give me some solace is that I talk to other CEOs, and a lot of people are having the same
Mm-hmm.
problem. But I feel like that's unfortunate for a lot of businesses. As far as the writing and again the career with touch, I'm doing what an entrepreneur has to do. I'm going back to the drawing board and regrouping myself, continuing to educate myself. I'm taking management classes now
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
can
yeah.
brush up on my leadership skills in case it is me. Like let me do my part. So taking management classes and again, just trying to get more into trainings and workshops and educating small businesses, putting more time into that. As far as my writing, I don't know if I can say this, but I had a beautiful series planned for Cleveland.com, and unfortunately, they didn't accept it. So that got tabled, but I am still planning to do some elements of it. And right now, the subject that keeps coming up to me, whether it be by friends or stuff that I'm seeing online, and also recently something passed in Ohio about it, so I'm planning on digging into this, is child support. I feel very strongly about the child support system. Now, to some extent, I'm like, do I have the clout to speak on this? Because I don't have kids. I am in the child support system. My mother never took my father to child support, so I have not dealt with it. But I know enough people who have, and I've
Mm-hmm.
heard the horror stories. And I think it's a system that is very predatory, especially on our
Mm-hmm.
community,
Mm-hmm.
especially on the black community. And I'm tired of seeing women use it as a weapon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm tired of even, unfortunately, so many men who just feel like it's nothing that they can do and don't know even how to go about fighting for their rights with that. And it's one of those subjects that like rarely gets any attention. Like nobody talks about it. It's just like, oh, that's for the kids. But the way the system is set up is just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. So that will most likely be the next thing that I attack. So yeah.
So tell everybody where they can find Chardonnay Graham and where we can find Touch Cleveland on the internet and social media.
Yeah, well, okay, I'm on Instagram, but you're not getting professional Chardonnay Graham on my Instagram, okay? So just fair warning with that. But I am on Instagram. You can find Touch at We Touch Markets on Instagram. I think we're still Touch Cleveland on Facebook. And then you can check out our website at WeTouchMarkets.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on Black
Thank
Anthropy. Uh,
you.
BlackAnthropy. That's the rest of our show for this first hour with Ms. Chardonnay Graham, owner and creative director of Touch Cleveland. Again, thank you so much for being on this morning.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time.
All right. I had no idea which camera to look at, but
I
you
should
know.
have told you. Did you turn mine on? I stopped it. Oh no, I stopped it. All right, this is the second hour of BlackAnthropy, the radio show where we shine a black light on individuals, nonprofit organizations, and entrepreneurs who are impacting the community lives of individuals and families by providing knowledge, resources, opportunities, and inspiration. And this morning, my guest is Marion Bryant. Thank you so much for being on BlackAnthropy.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
And she is going to talk about something that is very important, and she's going to shine a bright light on the knowledge of grant writing.
Mhm.
Something that I think is very important. People apply for grants all the time, and I don't think that people really understand what's involved in applying for a grant, requesting a grant.
Mhm.
So, Miriam, with your experience, get us started on what is grant writing?
Okay, grant writing is looking at an issue, concern, problem within a community and deciding that you as an organization or a group of people are going to come together and try to find some resolutions for that problem. And you know that you decide that you need some money to do that and decide that you're going to talk with funders about funding a particular project. Um, One of the things most people don't understand about grant writing is that no one is going to give you money if you don't have a nonprofit status. So the first step is going to be getting your nonprofit status, and it's a two-step process. The first step will be filing with the state of Ohio, and most people think that when they file with the state of Ohio, that gives you your 501c3 and your ability to seek grant money or seek money, and that's not accurate. It's the first step. What the state does is look at your application and decide whether your name can be registered
Yes,
with the state.
yes, very
And
good information.
and once they do that and decide your name is not somewhere else and it can be registered with the state, and you have provided people on the application who are going to be responsible for this organization, then they will give you a tax ID number and allow you to move to the next step, which will be a federal step. And there's a big application at the federal level for the 501c3 status. Um, Most people, when they see it, they panic. And I would say to anybody, you don't have to really panic. It's a step-by-step process, and they do have professional at MDC who will help you if you're running into problems. But it is a big application, and then once you submit your application and it's approved, you'll get a 501c3 status from the federal government. And it is generally good for 10 years. And then they'll call you, they'll send you a notice when you have to um, be recertified. So with that, I would say that the next step would be looking at what is the issue or concern that you have um, that you would need funding for. And most of the time, we find that people are looking at problems in the community, whether it's um, for a while it was teenage pregnancy, problems with juveniles in the community. Um, I have my last project was lead poisoning, working very hard on that one. So it could be counseling services, parent-child interventions, after-school programs. daycare. All of those would qualify. And at that point, you've decided maybe as an individual or a group that you want to work on something, and you've got to be truly passionate about the work or the issue. And I always say you have to get your hands dirty. A lot of people think that you can sit in an office somewhere, I call it the ivory tower, and write the grant that's going to get you the money. I say that if you've got to get out in the community, talk to people, involve the community in the writing the issue or addressing the issue, and then putting it a statement together, then putting a grant together. Um, then your next step will be, of course, finding the funding. And I want to say there is so much money. People have not a clue how much money is out there, both in the state of Ohio, in Cleveland, and then going nationally. So I always say to people, next step after you've got your basics together, start looking at funding. And there, Cleveland has the Cleveland Foundation has a funding um, source in their building where you can come in and look through their funding books. You can go to any public library. All the major public libraries have all of the funding directories, and the books are large and prolific, and you can then spend time just searching through, looking under the areas that you're wanting to get funding for. Each funder usually has a particular interest, or maybe three or four interests, and you want to look for a funder that is interested in what you're interested in, and that would make a good match. The next step would be once you do all that and you get all of that information, because the funders have cycles in terms of when they fund, and you want to get into their cycle and submit your application. From there, they will generally call you to schedule an in-person appointment to discuss the application. And if they don't, then you should call and schedule an appointment to discuss your application, your concerns, your needs, what the community is needing at that point. Let's see, what else would I want to? One of the critical pieces, critical, is do a deep dive into the research and data, data outcomes, research, what's happening across the nation. I always say there is nothing new under the sun, and somebody's doing something similar to what you're doing somewhere in these United States. And the best thing to do is to find out what they're doing. Talk with them on the phone, and get as much information from them as possible, because it helps your proposal, your writing, and you're putting data outcomes together, because they will probably if they're operating currently, they will have some outcomes that they can share with you. And that's so terribly important as you write.
Okay, and so that's something that I want to get into a little bit, is understanding that application. For one, you have to understand the audience, the grantor, the entity that you're requesting a grant for. Because the
Absolutely.
grant can be a grant request from the federal government, the state
Absolutely.
government, the local government, a big foundation, and
Or
again, that
small foundations.
and either foundations, they can be family, they can be community,
That's
and so
right.
you have to make sure that you're requesting a grant. Again, what you said, when you're first starting out, setting up your nonprofit organization, you want to be crystal clear on what your mission is and what are the things, the activities that you're going to be engaged in to fulfill that mission on a day-to-day, week-to-week,
That's correct.
year-to-year basis. And because that's what helps you to understand and not feel so overwhelmed with the actual grant application.
That's correct.
And because the grant application, talk about completing the grant application, understanding what's on that grant application and, how much care should be given to
Mhm.
each of those sections.
Okay, the grant applications are varied. There are some small um, funders who don't have an application. You present something to them. One would be the Gun Foundation here in Cleveland. They're considered a powerful but small foundation, and they have different areas that they focus money in, but you write to them. And then they have a program officer who will follow up with you and say, let's sit down and talk about this. Um, Cleveland Foundation, you can submit to them. I recommend with Cleveland Foundation that once you get your proposal, your together, that before you even think of submitting to Cleveland, that you sit down with a program officer and discuss the problem, what you want to do, what you need, how much money, and then the program director will guide the process within Cleveland Foundation. They may say, go back and you need to rewrite this section, you need to do some more here. They may raise some critical questions to you about finances, critical questions about who your finance director is. Is it a CPA? Or kinds of things? Are you going outside and having a consultant be your finance director? Those kinds of issues will come up, and the program officer will send you back home to work on those things and then reschedule a meeting with them. Once the program director at Cleveland is pleased with what you're writing, understands and sometimes the program directors will come out on site just to walk with you to get a feel for what you're doing too. And if you're saying, well, we want to do a youth program that's going to focus on rites of passage as a method for helping young people. And we're going to help them with their academics. They're going to become more involved in community activities, those kinds of things. But we're going to use a rites of passage model with that. Then the program officer is going to probably want to come out and look at that kind of thing, deep dive in. Not that they're questioning it so much as they may not understand,
Right.
and they're coming out to understand. I'll talk some about the federal level. The federal level is a whole different ball game. You really need a good track record before you apply for a federal grant because it's rigorous, rigorous. It takes a lot to do it, and it depends on which areas you're going for. JJDP, which is Juvenile Justice Department at the federal level, is probably the easier one to work through, but again, the application is rigorous. I would say that a organization needs to be in business for, I'd say, at least a good 7-8 years before they apply for a federal, because of the rigor and the fact that at the federal level they have a number of reviewers. I serve as a reviewer for federal grants, and so they send them out to reviewers. If you live in the area of a project then you recuse yourself from that and say, I can't review it because I'm too close to the area. So there's probably about 10, once you submit a federal proposal, there are probably 10 reviewers that review
Oh,
it
wow.
and then score.
Okay.
And then it goes back into that office for them to make a decision at that point. And most people, I mean, it's a lot of fun to do it, but to submit a proposal, but it's rigorous, very, very, very rigorous. And deadlines are deadlines. If you miss a
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah.
miss if you miss the deadline by a minute, oh well, that's next year you might want to resubmit because they won't accept it. You know, they have the strong deadline, and you must meet that deadline. I have done federal grants where I've flown them in to the office from here, from Cleveland. Yeah, because you want to make sure you meet that deadline. And
Again, and so a very important part of grant writing and requesting grants is making sure you understand what your objective is, what the issue is that you're going
mhm,
to address,
mhm,
how you're going to address it.
mhm,
You also should be talking about a very important part, who's going to help you address that and where you're going to get these people from and what are their qualifications. Talk about
sure,
the importance of making sure that the organization you set up has people with the skill, the knowledge, skill, ability to be able to help fulfill the mission
mhm.
of the
Oh, for
organization.
certain, for certain. What you'll do if you're just a if you're a newbie starting out, um, in the proposal, you're going to have to put your job descriptions. You know, so if you're going to hire 4 social workers with X a number of years in the field working with young people, that's going to have all of that kind of thing is going to be in the job description. How many hours per week they're going to be working? Is it part time, full time? Those kinds of things, so that the funder understands, you know, what kind of people you're hiring. If you have to hire a CPA, you know, you're going to hire a CPA full time, part time, whatever. You'll have a position description in there that says that. Um, um, Secretaries, receptionists, all of those job description positions that you're requesting funding for, you will have a job description in in your proposal, and it usually goes in the appendix part of the proposal where every job description is laid out and who they report to. A table of organization is listed. Your board of directors, you have to, as a 501c3, you have to have a board of directors. Your board of directors, who are they, and their backgrounds.
Yes.
In the federal proposals, you do have to put their vitas in the proposal. Sometimes in the local, you just have to identify who they are, give their address and a phone number where they can be reached. But all of that has to go in the proposal. That's part of it.
Okay. Now talk about the grants where, again, as you're doing the application, the importance of being able to demonstrate, explain in writing, whether as part of the grant application or one of the questions on the grant application
Mhm.
or as part of the appendices, that what activities have you already engaged in and what were the results of those and what will be done to ensure that uh, once you receive this funding, you will be able to sustain this project, this mission over X period of time. Talk about the importance of doing evaluation to achieve, to demonstrate that the objectives of the
Oh,
organization are
right.
achieved.
Oh, sure. You have to have program outcomes in the proposal. You're, what you're saying when you write your proposal is that we're going to provide this kind of service, and we expect these kinds of outcomes as a result of delivering this service. I'm being broad
Yes.
because and not knocking, going to anyone, broader so people can understand, because you may be serving meals. Okay, that might be your project, or but you're going to serve X number of meals, and the number of meals is going to result in nourishment for X number of people. Um, so all of that has to be in there. And I will say this too, that sometimes people get scared about meeting objectives, because you're going to have those objectives are in there. If you see that you're not meeting the objective that you've written, call the funder, call the program officer, and have a conversation about it. Most of them understand that you're not going to meet all your objectives. I mean, but they expect you to be the professional and say, okay, this is what's happening. This is what we're seeing. We thought we'd see X, and now we're seeing Y. And they'll say, okay, then what you'll do is just write an addendum and send it to us that this is where you are. But sometimes people get really, really frightened about that. The other critical piece is that the day you receive the notification that you're getting funded is the day you start looking for continuation funding. And that's where we do a disservice to our communities, because we wrote for the funds, and sometimes they're like for 3 or 4 years. 3 or 4 years go by fast in the world of funding, and then you have no money, so you have to just dump the program. And it may be maybe it should have been a needed service for the community, and whatever, in some form or fashion, a needed service. And so I always say, then you've raped the community, because you haven't done what you need to do at the very beginning. When you receive funding, then you need to be drilling down for funding for the next cycle.
And that's why it's important to know your mission,
Mhm.
know who's going to be the personnel to help you achieve the mission, have a board of directors where you're doing the meetings to
Mhm.
update on the progress of
Mhm.
achieving the mission.
Mhm.
Your board of directors, again, writing about what their qualifications are, who they are,
Mhm.
and demonstrates why they're on a board, because you really want your board of directors to be a resource and
Mhm.
be able to find people that can help to achieve the mission of the organization.
Mhm.
Another important thing, I think, in writing the grant and even setting up the organization and what is your mission, again, you can look to right to the requirement for the federal exempt status. You're organized and operated for educational purposes, for relief of the poor, distress, educational reasons. So really, whatever your mission is, the objective is that you're trying to achieve, you should always be going back to our mission is to, provide
Mhm.
this education through
Mhm.
this training.
Right.
These individuals are qualified to do this training because this is their background and experience.
Right.
And then if you're always tying it back to whatever prong of that federal statute, that, education, relief for the poor, housing, shelter, whatever it is, always tying it back to that. And like you're saying, it'll demonstrate that we plan to educate this many people. We intend to alleviate hunger,
Mhm.
this many people, and so forth and so forth. I think that may help to make the writing process of the grant application a little easier, is really being crystal clear and making sure you understand the mission of that organization so that you can be consistent in what you're saying
Mhm.
you're going to do and how the organization is going to go about doing it,
Mhm.
and always measuring what those outcomes are, because maybe, and we'll talk about this, we'll get into this
Mhm.
actually now, with understanding who the personnel is and do you have the right personnel
for what you're trying to achieve.
Mhm.
So a very good example, you have experience as a social worker.
Mhm.
So talk about like here in Cleveland, the Adams Board, where they were when they were set up, and again the evolution of that organization, how they set
Mhm.
up, and they constantly changed and evolved, and that funding process that is involved with that, and how they landed, pretty much where they are today.
Right. Well, the Adams Board started out as the 648 Board, which was House Bill 648, which um, said the state was going to provide dollars in every county of the state of Ohio for mental health services. Prior to that, there was no mental health service, and this was in 1968. That's why is House Bill 648 was in 1968. And so the state allocated money to every 648 board, or which is mental health board, and they in turn would seek proposals from the community for mental health services, a wide variety of mental health services. At the further down the road, the state did the same thing for drug abuse, and they developed the drug board, and the drug board was parallel with the mental health board. And at some point, the state made the decision to merge those boards, and that's why you have the Adams board now. Um, Feeling that some of the problems overlapped in terms of substance abuse and mental health, and why not pull the two pots of dollars together, and the pots of dollars could therefore service the community better. Uh, and pretty much that's how it operates. And then people organizations can apply to the Adams Board today to provide services in the community. And you do the same thing that you would do with any funder. You look at where the board's priorities are, because their priorities change, from year to year. And if you are a new organization applying to the board, you're going to want to land in one of those priorities. If you are an organization that's been getting continuation funding from the board, they look at how you're doing as an organization. You're submitting to them constantly information on the people that you serve, the outcomes, and the expenditure of dollars. All of that is monitored by the board. And and then you may do some things like if they're doing a new pot of money, putting a pot of money into a new project, even an organization that's already in existence could apply for some of that money to expand their programs. Um, we have in so one of the first organizations I happened to do my field placement with one of the first organizations in that got received mental health funding from the board, and from there they asked me to come aboard and work, and that was the CIT mental, well, it was called the Crisis Intervention Team at that point, and we provided services across the county to everybody, and we were part of the um, police undercover service, in that there was a police, Cleveland had a mod squad, and it was just like there was a mod squad television show, and this mod squad was built just like that. And we were a part of that, so that sometimes at night they would go out on a raid, and if they got to a raid and there were children involved, they would call us because we would come out and get the children and get them placed somewhere. So I got called out a couple of times on some some dangerous situations with them, but we're going in to provide that arm of social service and mental health services that they need at that moment in time. Um, there had been developed, and I had the opportunity also to help develop a mental health center. Um, in Cleveland, at one time, there were 5 community mental health centers, and now we're down to 1. Um, Murdis H. Taylor was the very first mental health center, and it is still in operation with, I'm going to say, maybe the main center and 7 locations through, even on the west side. At one point, there was also the West Side Community Mental Health Center. Glenville had its own mental health center. There was Murdis Taylor. Trying to think of Catherine Tyler had. Oh, East Cleveland had its own mental health center, and the mental health centers received federal dollars. I mean, big federal dollars. We talking about maybe 2 million, 3 million a year in federal dollars, and then the mental health board did some local match in terms of where there were some more additional needs. And I would have to say now there's really been a decline in mental health services. I think, and it's probably driven by dollars for sure, because several mental health centers closed. Community mental health, Westside Community Mental Health Center, community guidance that serviced the center city, East Cleveland closed, Catherine Tyler closed, and so it left Murdis Taylor, who was the first community mental health center, is now the one that's servicing the larger part of the county as a community mental health center.
Okay. And so again, this is why understanding grant writing is important, because if the funding is cut from the federal level, and again, so if there an organization is created in existence to carry out a particular mission objective, and you talked about this earlier, when you get that first pot of funding, you need to continue to look for sources. So that can be a reason why they went out of existence.
Oh, sure.
Because they were so reliant on what they were getting from the federal government, and then no one was in place to ensure that the organizations, the different mental health facilities, were applying for grants from more than one grantor.
Sure.
And so that could be a reason why they went out of existence.
One of the bigger issues was that, of course, they were getting big dollars from the federal government, but they also were getting dollars from the mental health board. And as the dollars shrunk from the federal government, they were anticipating more money coming from the mental health board. And during this time of turmoil, there was a move on to close state hospitals, state psychiatric hospitals. And I served on the committee to close Fairhill. And the message from the state was, we're going to close these state hospitals because they are inappropriate for a number of the people there, and we're going to have the dollars follow the client. That was the message. The dollars were to follow the client, and so you put all of these clients out of the state hospitals, sent them to the community mental health centers, and the dollars that were supposed to follow the client did not follow the client. And so the mental health centers were then having to find housing, day programs. They had to develop day treatment programs, housing, deal with the fact that the clients did not want to stay on medications,
Mm.
which was their right,
Mhm.
but at the same time, then they would end up on the street, and you had to have staffing available 24/7 to go do the rescue kinds of pieces. And as the mental health centers were saying, okay, we can deal with doing some of this as long as we've got the dollars to do it. Well, when you don't have the dollars to do that, then you're having to lay off your staff. Okay, so you're reducing manpower, and it gets to the point where a CEO has to say, talk to his board about closing, and that's what happened to the mental health centers. The CEOs just said, we can't do this. We can't manage. We can't do what we're supposed to do with the dollars that we're receiving, and it would be better for us not to do it than to
Wanna as a nonprofit organization, it's important to understand even that just because you're not in business to make a profit
right.
does not mean
You
that you
can't
should
make.
not be in business to continuously look at ways to bring in revenues to achieve the objective.
That's
So
right.
you should have some kind of program service that may charge a nominal fee. You should always be soliciting donations and contributions from individuals, corporations, and so forth. You should be having fundraisers,
Right.
because you never know when you could end up in a situation like what you're just describing
Absolutely.
with the mental health facilities closing. Once a decision is made to stop funding the the psychiatric hospitals, one, the funding is going to go away. Two, just because they say the funding is going to follow these individuals, you can't be certain that that's going to happen. And so you should always be looking at your funding levels to say what other grants line up to what I've already received, and talk about,
And the, and
do the importance of other grantors looking at your track history of getting this funding
sure.
and looking at your results and seeing this is an organization we probably should be funding.
Oh, sure, they do. They do. The other thing that you have to look at also in terms of, that's a good segment that you're talking about, other sources of funds. A lot of times there are dollars in insurance. You bill for insurance as much as possible, and you bill Medicaid, Medicare, all third parties, in terms of when clients come in, because that produces revenue. And the other is, most facilities, large facilities have grant writers on staff.
Yes.
You have to, so that you can be, that's your job, to be searching constantly for additional dollars. And it may be, you find somebody who doing your research, and you see you're doing a day program for severely mentally ill people, and you find that somebody out there, halfway across the country, a funder has that as a passion to fund,
Yes,
and you go
yes.
after those dollars.
Yes.
And it can only happen when you have a grant writer
Yes,
whose
I
that's
understand.
job is to seek the funds, because otherwise, you're going to have a staff person who's torn between looking for funds and delivering services. And that can be a bear.
And I like what you talked about earlier, like with the Cleveland Foundation. They have people there that is their job, is to talk to prospective grantees about what needs to be in an application, what they're looking at, and what they're considering. That is their job. So do not feel uncomfortable or burdensome or bothersome to them
No.
when calling and saying, I'd like to apply for a grant. What are the qualifications? What do I have to do? Because that's their job, is to sit there and talk with you
Sure.
about that.
Sure, and they're usually pretty good about saying, let's schedule an appointment so you can come in and we can talk about what you're planning, you know, and they will come out, you know, they will come out to see what you're doing, you can build really great relationships with um, the foundations. And it's not just Cleveland. I want to say Kellogg, which is national, the Joyce Foundation,
Yes.
another national, that are lots of hands-on stuff. I mean, for me, meaning hands-on means that they will come to you and see what you're doing. You know, they want to see how things are going for you. And when you have um, ceremonies or crossovers or recognitions of your participants succeeding, that's a time to invite a program officer out so they can see, oh, this is what our dollars are doing,
Mhm.
and it makes them feel good. It makes them feel part of the process. And I learned that very early on with Cleveland Foundation, that they really do like to come out and see and be a part of, programming, seeing the success of things that you're doing, because you're going to talk to them about the failures or the problem
Right,
areas.
right, right.
So they also want to see some of the successes, and they know that you're going to have some. And you just invite. I mean, even if it's a recital where the kids are doing something, a dance or dance program or something, or you've got a GED program where you've got all these people graduating from GED. That's a good time to invite some program officers out, to see that. And it keeps them connected to you in terms of additional funding.
Yes, 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 yes. Well, as we wrap up, I really do appreciate you coming on and
Mhm.
talking about grant writing because, when I set up this organization, part of it is, again, the mission is to shine a black light on individuals, nonprofits, and entrepreneurs who are impacting the lives of individuals, families, and the community
Mhm.
by providing knowledge, resources, and opportunity. And one thing I don't think that there's enough talk about is grant writing and
Mhm.
organizations understanding how to get started with grant writing, understanding that maybe along with your board, because your board should be helping you to get resources, almost before you even, if you're not an expert in grant writing, the importance of having someone who is, because what's going to allow you to
Mhm.
sustain your existence
Mhm.
is by having someone whose job is devoted to grant writing. And the more they apply for grants, the better they'll get at it, and the longer your organization can stay in existence. And even if you devote your time to helping fulfill the mission, that's better than trying to do both.
Mhm.
Because someone helping get funding for the organization is very important. And so as we wrap up, talk about how you got into grant writing and what you would recommend to anyone, to organizations
Mhm.
that need funding. What should they
Okay.
be doing to get a person such as yourself an experienced grant writer?
Oh, okay. Well, I got into grant writing out of necessity. Yeah, I so was am a, started out as a psychiatric social worker, and needed. I was I started in I would say I always say the white community, but it was we were in the eastern suburbs, and we wanted to expand, needed an expansion in our counseling program. Um, and I had come up with a slogan that said, um, every now and then we all need someone. And we wanted to march through that and make people feel more comfortable coming in for counseling. Well, we were, of course, very bombarded when we did some marketing out there, which meant that then we had waiting lists for counseling. And some of it was very critical, um, in terms of child abuse, spouse abuse. Those were very critical issues in the eastern suburbs. And so I started drilling for dollars. I said, well, the only way we're going to be able to do expand or service the people that are on our waiting list is to add some more staff. And I started writing to people, and I mean, I even wrote a grant to Texas, somebody in Texas, for funds, and we'd start getting money in, and so then it's like a bug. You get hooked on it, and and you say, okay, I can. I mean, because what you have to balance is the yeses with the nos, and understand that you're going to get some nos, but but the yeses, fire you up and say, okay, we can keep going with this. Um, and then at one point in my career, I decided that I wanted to work in the black community. I had never worked in a black community. I mean, work. I volunteered, of course, but I just never had used my professional skills on a day-to-day basis in the black community. And so I left and I applied to Murtis Taylor and got hired there. I loved it. I loved it. It was, I say God called me there, because I felt that, you know, I felt like I was at home. And of course, there were tremendous amount of problems there, I mean, in that community. And drugs were rampant in Murtis Taylor area. Mount Pleasant area was considered the #1 drug place in Cuyahoga County. Um, and have some wonderful stories, because to write proposals, I would get out on the street and walk the streets and talk with people. I'd go talk to the guys who were sitting on a milk cart drinking beer and playing cards at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I would sit and talk with them and try and get information from them. Drug users, I would sit in sellers, I would talk with them. And because I would be out walking sometimes in the evening, they would actually protect me. And I have the wonderful story of I would have been dead if a bullet was coming and I could see the bullet coming, and a guy just pushed me to the ground and put his body over me. But what I learned from sitting and talking with the guys selling drugs was they that they were trying to make money, trying to live the American dream, the dream that's on TV. You need a car, you need this, you need that, and they didn't have the skill sets to do anything other than sell the drugs at that point in time. I pulled kids out of gangs. We wrote programs that pulled kids out of gangs. Um, Built relationships with the Muslim community. They were like my police, my private police. If something happened with a kid, because one of the things that happens is when kids would come out of gangs, then the gang would slice them. And I could get the Muslim brothers would go to when we put the kid in the hospital, the Muslim brothers would go there and stay with that child around the clock. They put police protection around that kid. Had some wonderful successes with programs. We did Rites of Passage, got national recognition for it. Bill Clinton sent us what about it, because he was just so impressed with it. We had a little boy that came out of the gang, slashed, turned around. Our staff turned that kid around. He got the governor's award and a 4-year scholarship to go play golf at a university. So my passion has always been, after having that experience, we can do more, as a people, as an African American people, to help our people. And we can do it through grant writing, and sometimes you just have to start with a good passion, a good passion. And then the writing will come, the writing will flow. If you write it down and you have somebody help you with the language, you you will get the money because people look for passionate programs to fund. You know, where there's going to you they can feel that in the writing, um, the staff, the people will be there to really carry out what they're saying they're going to do.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on
Oh,
BlackAnthropy
well,
this
thank
afternoon
you.
and sharing all of your knowledge about grant writing. Hopefully, you've introduced people to different resources
Mhm.
that they need to or can tap into. Provide people the opportunity to learn more about grant writing,
Oh,
and
sure.
you've been a big inspiration on how you can make change in people's lives and their
Mhm.
communities and their
Mhm.
families by setting up organizations and getting funding to help people out of troubled
Mhm.
circumstance they may
Mhm.
be in. So thank you so much
Oh, well,
again,
thank
Mary
you.
and Brian, for
Well,
being on
well,
BlackAnthropy.
thank you for having me.
All right, you're welcome. And that's going to be it for BlackAnthropy today, November 27th. Thank you so much for tuning in,
Okay.
and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Okay.